This book is called The Anonymous Novel. It's a novel about Gorbachev's Russia, about the hopes that Gorbachev raised, and about the drama and tragedy that followed. I began to write it in the 80s, when hopes were high, and I achieved it in the 90s, when everything had gone wrong. And I tried to write it as a Russian writer would. A Russian writer back in the 90s who wouldn't care to leave his name on record, and that's why it's called The Anonymous Novel. I'm both an historian and a writer, a novelist, and I felt compelled to write this book because as an historian I felt the thrill of the momentous change that was happening at that time. But in fact, I think I wrote this book mainly because as a writer and as a reader, I had been so long in love with Russian literature. I've experienced a mad love, in fact, with the Russian literature of the 20th century, not just the great novelists of the 19th, but all those writers who lived in the Soviet era, those who choose exile, like Solzhenitsyn, and those who choose to stay on, like Bulgakov, or like other names who are not so well remembered today in the West, like Yuri Trifonov, for instance, but who rank among the very best writers of the 20th century. So for many years I read everything that was published into my own tongue, Italian, or into other Western tongues. My Russian is unfortunately too scant to enable me to read them in the original. I read and I read and I read, and I became so imbued with the style and panache of Soviet writers that I wished to be one of them. And so I embarked into this foolish project to write a novel which would be read as if it had been written in Russian by a Russian writer. Like every good Russian novel, it's a novel of many characters. But among them, two are outstanding, and the two main stories are told. It's a novel about two jobs. The historian's job, my own job, and the judge's job, the job of the inquirer. So, one of the main characters is Tanya, the young woman historian, who lives through the great excitement of the moment when Soviet archives were, for the first time in history, thrown open to researchers. And Tanya embarks in her own quest for past truths, not only truths about her country, but also about her own family. And she also discovers the dangers that are still lurking when somebody tries to go too far in his quest for truth. On the other side, the other main character is a judge. Nazar Kalistratovich has been charged to solve a mystery, the murder of a Muslim cleric in faraway Azerbaijan, one of the Soviet republics with a Muslim population. And Nazar Kalistratovich, in his quest for truth, will unveil some of the evils that are waiting for Russia in the future. The spread of organized crime, Caucasian mafia, and on the other side, the spread of Islam and of Islamic integralism in the Turkish-speaking republics of the former Soviet Union. So what happens is that I try to tell two very different stories about two jobs that are at first sight very different, but in fact they are one and the same, because they are both about truth and the quest for truth. And what I've also tried to tell is that in any country, the past and the future are so thoroughly entangled, it is hardly possible to fully disentangle them.